Welcome back to another episode of the Corporate Cowboys podcast. Today's proof of life of Tuesday, February 14th. It's Valentine's Day, 2023. My name is Alex. I am your host for another 30-minute consult. This one's for free. You don't have to pay us nothing. Nothing. If you want to donate to keep this operation, to keep the podcast nonprofit, by all means. Anything you send us goes to business expenses and legal fees. I suggest you follow us, if anything, and share the corporate love. On Instagram, you'll find us at Corporate Cowboys with a Z. On Rumble, that's also at Corporate Cowboys. No Z on that one. On YouTube, Corporate Cowboys. On Patreon, the Corporate Cowboys podcast. You can subscribe. Yes, that does siphon a couple of dollars from your account to ours. But like I mentioned before, that is going to business expenses, right? That's stationery, paper clips, staplers, revolvers, and legal fees, right? So today's question is coming from r/career advice, right? And now we deliver this opinion. It's not advice, nothing that we give over the airwaves, nothing that we provide in our content should be construed as legal advice, right? We don't condone any wrongful activity. We're not advocating for anything just yet, other than you simply be professional and you arm yourself with knowledge or something similar. That's it. If you're in corporate, you're looking to move up, you're looking to start strategizing your ascent, your move up the ladder, or maybe you need to clear the way in order for you to move up, there are ways to do it. There are ways to do so that are above board, and there are others in which you might need to employ some creativity in order to keep from crossing certain lines. Without further ado, today's question is asking us how to say in interviews you quit your job because of a bad boss. And they don't mean bad like, damn, that bitch bad. No. They mean like an incompetent boss, a petty boss, just an inept boss that does not know how to handle business. And so they were not a good boss. They were not a good leader. How do you say that in an interview without jeopardizing your candidacy for employment? I mean, can you get away with it? Can you get away with bad-mouthing somebody else if they are not there to defend themselves? I mean, that has been a saying that I was raised with. That doesn't mean that I didn't badmouth anybody professionally, right? There's just a way to doing it where you're not denigrating them as a human, but you are discounting their professional competencies, their professional capacity. Now, if you could avoid speaking ill of somebody, then do that. Avoid it outright. Let your work speak for itself, as their work will speak for them. By their fruits they shall be known, right? So said the Bible or the Quran or the Torah, whatever. Somebody somewhere said that, and it's true. You don't mind what somebody says, you mind what they do. You pay attention to what they do, because what they do confirms who they are. Actions speak louder than words. So, if they aren't there to defend themselves with words, what you think you bad-mouthing them is going to somehow validate you as being better, validate you as being justified, more reasonable? No, no, it won't. It won't. I would avoid it. Any way you can, I would avoid it. Sure, you can beat around the bush a little bit if you know how to conduct an interview, right? Because an interview is two-way, right? If you know how to conduct an interview, there are ways to answer questions in which you can expose leadership and at the same time preserve the integrity of what is the corporation. Because the corporation never did anything to you. The corporation doesn't deserve to be bad mouth, doesn't deserve to be associated with these piece of shit employees, with these piece of shit executives, right? So why would you say a place is horrible to work for when you worked there? If anything, you'd be exposing yourself. You would be jeopardizing your prospects of getting hired because you worked at that quote toxic work environment, at that toxic workplace. And what you think the interviewer isn't going to think that you're bringing that quote toxicity with you? What the fuck made everybody else stay? What, are you the only one who saw this corporation, this company for what it was, and you were the only one who spoke out, and you were the only one who was silent, and you were the only one who chose to leave? I mean, we'd like to think that humans are self-interested, and so if there was fuckery afoot, the folks would just leave. The folks would just leave. They wouldn't stand for it. Granted, there are some entities out there that have a culture of fuckery. Like it's just built on a foundation of fuckery. It happens. It's not unheard of. But still, I wouldn't go around exposing that business because you worked there. Unless you were there for what, less than 6 months and you plan on not answering any questions about it. But if they ask you directly why you left, what, are you just going to be are you just going to be pleading the fifth? That doesn't apply in this context. It's not a criminal investigation yet. All right? Let me read the body for you, man, because but like with every title, I always go off on my own little rant before returning to the body, before returning to the case at hand, the matter at hand. The body says, I'm going on an interview in a company that is in the same building as a place of my previous employment. The company I'm interviewing for wasn't there at the time. I don't know why the first sentence is there. The fact that they're a different company in the same building you used to be employed, does that fucking matter? All right. The company I'm interviewing for wasn't there at the time. Both companies are world-known companies, so they're known worldwide. Okay. After seeing in my CV that I have worked in the company in the same building, there is a realistic chance they'll ask me why I left that company. Okay. Now we're cooking. Now we're thickening the plot. The plot thickens. Get ready to cut through it and serve up some slices of plot. The reason I quit, it continues, the reason I quit is because I had a pretty bad boss with whom I just couldn't get on a same page with despite all my efforts. Huh. And that's it. They cut it there. So there's no concluding question. So we go back to the title. How do I say in interviews you quit your job because of a bad boss? They really want a reason why? Just tell them that the opportunities available there were not to your liking, were not to your expectation. You remain the professional. You see, I start off with the top, the cream of the crop. You remain the professional and you tell them, assuming that you're going in for an interview and you want to secure that shit, and the salary is worthwhile, the bennies are lined up. You tell them that your professional expectations were not being met. Period. That's it. That's it. Your professional expectations were not being met. Yes or yes. Right? That's why you left. You said you couldn't get on the same page with your boss. I mean, maybe your boss has a different story, right? We don't have your boss on the line and we can't confirm with them. You might have been the piece of shit. And now you're job hopping from from company to company, hoping that you aren't exposed as being the problem. But, I'm not gonna play accuse the victim here. They haven't yet claimed to be the victim. Not yet. Right? They just couldn't get on the same page. And that's that. Right? Dust your hands off. Boom. They're not claiming that they were harassed or that their boss accosted them or that the work piled on and they had no support. Right? None of that. Not yet. Not yet. But you still always have in your back pocket your professional reputation, your professional development, your ultimate goals for improvement, for betterment, for being a better professional, aspiring to be a consummate professional always. And if your standards, if your expectations weren't being met, what choice did you have but to leave and continue your development with another organization? Now, they may follow up and say, well, you couldn't reach out. There wasn't a point of contact that you could get in touch with in order to address these issues that you had. You let them know. You let them know that you sought outside opportunities because you looked ahead. Because you looked ahead and you saw that professional development would be more fruitful at another company. And it just so happens to be why you're applying with them. You don't tell them that the company you're leaving had no professional development because for one reason or another you applied and you worked for it. If you tell them that it was a bad work environment, a bad company, again, you expose yourself for having worked there. What, you couldn't look ahead? I get, and I understand that the professional experience is accumulated through trial and error. And that happens over a course of time. Right? Now, that's not to say you can't learn from listening to a podcast. If folks like me, corporate cowboys, are telling you don't badmouth the company, it's because you're going to be working in the same building. And word gets across. Rumor spreads. You don't know. Maybe the person interviewing you plays golf with your former boss. What you want to have them understand is that you're the professional they're hiring. They aren't hiring the company you used to work for. They're hiring you, the individual, to work with them professionally. That's the point. At no point in time should your boss's reputation be addressed. And if it is, I mean, you should avoid it for as long as possible. If they're hounding you for it, I mean, that's unprofessional in and of itself, which should cause you to reconsider, take pause, whether or not you want to be working for a company that deals in dirty laundry like that, that deals in gossip like that. Personally, I wouldn't. But I'm not you, am I? That's not something that you want to be addressing upon interview, right? If ever, if the trust ever is cultivated, it's not something you want to be addressing with them. Definitely not. That might be a war story. Save it for a card night if you want to trade stories and it comes up in a more casual environment. But when you're dealing with business, you take care of business in order for business to take care of you. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure by bad mouthing somebody you used to work for. You appear unloyal, disloyal. You appear compromised already, whether or not they could trust you with any faults and defects they might have within their ranks. And that's not something that all professionals consider, is that some of these problems could be fixed by them simply speaking up or leaving if they see the situation is unresolvable. The issues are, what's the term I'm looking for? Recalcitrant. It's repetitive, repeating, ingrained. Still, it's best to remain professional, to be the most reasonable one in the room. They're not asking you for dirt. They're just asking why you left. You could give them any number of reasons. The one at the top of my list is just going to be professional development. You thought you had reached capacity to how you could develop yourself professionally. And so you sought opportunities outside of the company and you pursued those. And that could be through another employer, another company, returning to school, pursuing some other hobby, some other project, some other work, something that developed you professionally in order to conserve whatever identity development you have going on. Professionally, of course, professionally. Nobody gives a fuck about your personal identity until they know you personally. But everyone knows you first professionally. That's why I harp on developing yourself professionally, being a consummate professional. Because what is the professional spills into the personal. And business is always personal. Business is war. You're probably tired of hearing that. But I'm not tired of saying it because it's the truth. And so business is always personal. Let's take a look at some of these comments here. I would venture to guess they're saying the same thing. Don't badmouth who is not there to defend themselves. I was raised with that quality, that characteristic. And that's only because, I mean, if you're feeling so live, so brave, if you're feeling so bold, why didn't you speak up while you were there? You could badmouth them in person. You could put your foot down. You could put work in. You want to be a professional, a hitter, you want to be a corporate cowboy so bad, and pick up the last resort. Otherwise, do it moving. Do it moving. Look out for yourself first. And by yourself, I mean look out for your professional reputation first. By developing yourself and never compromising on your values. The first comment here says, don't say that. don't say that. It says, you have options. Options are the scope of your role shifted outside what you were hired for. That seems very to the point, very on the nose. The scope of your role shifted outside of what you were hired for. And I might agree with that. Only if the scope of your role shifted unreasonably, where you felt you weren't being supported or your professional development was straying from where you wanted it. Right? Have it come back to your professional development. Why it wasn't helping you, why it wasn't facilitating your increase in value in order to help the company, right? But never immediately say, oh, because they were having me do things that I wasn't hired for, right? That sounds not just brash. That sounds petty. That sounds unprofessional. Though that's a good reason. It's a very good reason to leave. But it's about how you frame it to your future employer. Again, you, the consummate professional, never complains. Never say, oh, they gave me too much work and no support, and they changed the work up on me. Nah, it's just your opportunities change, and you saw fit to pursue better opportunities. The end. The second here says, not the second comment, but the second option. So the first option is the scope of your role shifted outside what you were hired for. Second is the work-life balance wasn't ideal. I mean, that's somewhat of a cop-out, but passable. The third is you didn't have opportunities to expand your skill set / grow. That one. The third. This one. The third. This one is the go-to. The opportunities were different. The opportunities changed up on you. You saw better opportunities. Or the company could not offer you more opportunities. The company was at capacity. You see, even that sounds like the company was doing right, and you're not outright downing the company, bagging on the company, saying that the company was a piece of shit or anybody in there was just straight ass and complicit in fuckery. But you're saying that the opportunities were not available there for you to continue growing. That's the go-to. I mean, it's the one that I've used the most. Yes, I have badmouthed some employers, some managers, some coworkers before. But if it wasn't to their face, it definitely was not in an interview. Not on my first day in. Maybe not on my first month in. Maybe our second or third lunch or dinner or cocktail party or poker night. When you start getting into the nitty-gritty of the personal, of the individual, you start talking war stories and exchanging them. It's not glamorous. We don't have, I mean, some of us have scars. We don't have actual scars to show off, but we've got stories to tell, and those are scarring enough. The fourth piece here says, and add, that's why I'm interested in working here. And shit, I said that. That should be a motive. That should be the motive for why you're applying there. If they ask you why you left, the reason you left one place should be a motive. Like the motive that you give, the motive that you state. for you applying to this new employer. Why? Because it's seamless, it's fluid, it's transitional. They'll understand. Obviously, you wouldn't apply if your former employer was a great employer. They wouldn't expect you to apply to a lesser company. If they ask you, why did you leave? You say, oh, because this company is a piece of shit. I'm applying here because I know you guys will fuck me. No, no, of course, right? So the converse of that is going to be, why did you leave your former employer? Because I wanted to work here. That's why. I want to work here. That's why. That's why I'm even taking this interview, because I'm interested in working here. I'm interested in taking advantage of the opportunity to work here. I mean, you want to get more specific? That again depends on what these world renowned companies are known for, what they do, the industry you're in, the experience you have, the region you're located in. That's all relevant. And if I had you as a client face to face, we would go into that in some pretty extensive detail. If you, the listener, need help, have an associate, have a buddy who's contemplating their next move, are you contemplating a move inside corporate? I mean, you already got that shot in your arm. You're already stuck in the system. You might as well make moves. Move righteously. Give us a shout. We'd be happy to work with you. Set something up. Our rates are more than reasonable. More often than not, we might just recommend you subscribe. For some, they get more value just following, listening to the podcast, listening to the content that's free, right? Or even recommending it, suggesting something through the Q&A or through the suggestion boxes, than actually taking the time out of their day, paying out of pocket for something that's personalized, for something that might intimidate them, right? This is intimidating when you first contemplate strategizing your own promotion, your own advancement, your own development. It's literally taking your fate into your own hands, not leaving it in the hands of seniority. Oh, because Alex has been here longer, we're going to promote. Because Alex has been here 5 years sucking dick, we're going to move him up. Because he's good. Because he's never missed a day sucking dick. So we're going to move him up. No, not at all. This is where merit meets talent. And when that comes together, you need a good fucking plan. You need a good fucking strategy to implement something actionable. So when push comes to shove, you don't fall, you don't falter, and you don't stutter when you are advocating for yourself. And then it says, lastly, don't talk badly about individuals at your previous job. That's pretty straightforward. Then somebody comments on that actually, and the most favorite of all is, quote, creative differences. Yeah, creative differences I think is also a cop out. I wouldn't throw out there creative differences unless you're interviewing for an executive position, something in a leadership role, right? If you were in a position of control, of supervision, pretty much directing, like if you were a director, if you were directing how the company was being managed, and you left because you had, and at this point it wouldn't even be a bad boss, right? It would be a bad colleague, it would be a bad coworker, and had creative differences on how you envisioned the company running, on how you envision operations would go, that's when you bring up creative differences. Creative differences, I feel, is also somewhat of a cop out, especially if you were not in a position to if you were not being paid, if you were not contracted to be creative. Why the fuck would you have differences? You're being told what to do, and you either do them right, you do it well, you do it effectively, or you don't. You're fumbling the bag constantly. Now you could do it creatively. You could do your job creatively and maybe have that as a suggestion for your boss, for your managers, something they could consider. And if they don't hear you out, that goes back to opportunities for growth. The opportunities for you to grow just weren't there. They're not creative differences. I wouldn't, unless you're about that life and you were on that level, unless you were about that death, I would not put myself on that level of creative differences. I feel like that's low key disrespectful, especially if you were never hired to be creative. I think creativity falls in line with your opportunity for growth. It's you who are being creative for your growth. Unless you were hired to be creative, I would I don't know. It's like this word creative is thrown around, which is why I'm throwing it around a lot right now because I want to expose it for the buzzword that it is. Don't think just because you're creative, you got money coming to you. You still have to do work, and you can work creatively, but don't for a second think that creative differences makes you any better when you were not hired to address creative differences, right? Creative differences is along the lines of like irreconcilable differences. It like divorce. And divorce is pretty bilateral. You're on the same level with one another. You were married together. You were in a partnership together, right? Does that not sound like two executives? Does that not sound like two directors? That's not a manager and an employee, like a subordinate employee having creative differences. Don't don't fucking stretch your professionalism where it doesn't belong. Don't. If you weren't hired for it, if you weren't hired for it, you're doing the most and you're not being compensated, right? You're doing the most, not being compensated for it. So your growth opportunities have been exhausted. Stick with that. Don't go the creative differences route if you can't back it up. And that puts me over on this consult. If you like what you heard, or if it made you think, if you didn't like what you heard and it made you think, you're like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? But in a way that's too specific. If that was oddly specific, and you find yourself in a situation, in a position where you're thinking, am I working creatively? Or am I being too creative? Am I being too liberal in my idea of creativity? In my idea of control? Circle back. Circle back to where you are in terms of opportunities, the ones you can capitalize on, and the ones that are costing you growth. Don't sacrifice your professional growth like you wouldn't badmouth somebody who wasn't there to defend themselves. You want to badmouth somebody, do it to their face. You want to be bold, you want to be brave, do it with them present. I mean, it's easy to hide, just like it's easy to hide behind a keyboard. It's easy to talk about somebody who's not there. You're just gossiping. That's bitch level shit. And why would they ask you that? Just give them the straightforward answer. Opportunities were exhausted. Opportunities were not there. My professional developments required something else, required me to learn something that I could not working there. So I applied here. So I went back to school. So I applied at some other place and picked up those skills that I believed I lack that now make me worth this number. Fucking 6 figures, 7 figures. I don't fucking know what you're negotiating. I'll catch you on the next one. You take care of yourself.